Hi. So basically, I'm here to tell a story, which is my story, and my story in the world of luxury, because I was born in the lap of luxury, and not because of my family's economic status or because I was born in Kuwait, but because of where my mother works. My mother works at one of the most incredible collections of Islamic art that exists. And part of that collection is on display here at the Americani. And it's the Dar al-Athar al-Islamiyya. It's incredible. I had the luxury of growing up amongst the objects of this collection, and I worked there for a few summers. Working there enabled me to come into contact with these objects and to really study them and to appreciate them and appreciate how they were made, their beauty in every aspect. And the thing that I appreciated the most was the fact that it wasn't just the objects that were important. It wasn't just the objects that were for official use or gifts from kings to kings. It was objects that were used for every day that were beautiful. Everything that surrounded this era, in my opinion, and I'm sure in many of yours, was very beautiful. But this posed to be a bit of a problem because growing up, I believed that all weapons should be studied in diamonds and rubies. And that basically on the 40th birthday of every ruler, he should be weighed in gold, and that his gold should be distributed amongst the people, of course. And to my biggest dismay, I was convinced that one day I would own my own emerald cup, and that I would have my name and my family's names inscribed on this cup that I would eventually use. That was definitely not the case. My brother's laughing. We basically, we grew up in this luxury. We loved every part of this collection. We still love every part of this collection, and it's made us who we are. It also introduced me to the meaning of luxury. Now, the meaning of luxury in its formal sense is the elegance and refinement of things that are not necessary. So if you think about the way we live today, we live in an era of luxury. I mean, you wake up in the morning and everything is taken care of for you. I mean, you don't have to really worry about anything. If you have an iPhone, your day is pretty much covered, and all you have to worry about maybe is cooking, but I'm sure with the iPhone 6 that'll be taken care of. I mean, it's the era of luxury, except that we are beginning to accept luxury in a different sense. We're accepting consumer luxury, if you want. We consume comfort. We buy things around us. We buy services that make us more comfortable. But we're forgetting about, everyday objects that are important to us, that are important to our heritage, that make us who we are. And this is an important subject to tackle. I mean, when I grew up and I moved to Beirut because I wanted to get to know the city that I was from. And I arrived in Beirut, I looked around, and every house I went to had incredible objects. I mean, there were beautiful mother-of-pearl chests, copper tables. Everyone had an element in their house that was incredible. And this is an example of a very beautiful mother-of-pearl inlay chest. And it's beautiful. I mean, we've all seen them a million times, but this one's incredibly beautiful because it's done on a curve, which means that on a curve, you'd have to find hundreds and hundreds and go through hundreds of pearl shells to find the right tone and the right curve to make hundreds and hundreds of small pieces that would make up this chest of drawers. So the time, the effort, everything that went into this chest of drawers is insane. And of course, I would always ask the people whose houses these objects were in, who made this? And they tell me, Abu Khalid, he's the best. He's known everywhere. This guy's incredible. He has incredible hands. They're nimble, they're thin. He'll make jewelry. Your furniture will be jewelry. Where is he? Where's Abu Khalid? I'd love to meet him. I'd love to interview. Met. Died. No problem. Okay, so where's his son? Engineering. He's an engineer. He has no interest in the craft. Okay. You'd see a copper plate, you'd see something else, you'd ask, where's the guy? Where's the guy who made it? Canada. So they were either dead or they had migrated. And basically, this is only because the market that we live in today, us as consumers, allowed this to happen. I mean, growing up in my father's office, there was a poster that he had that had been made for my mother and father in the 70s when they got married. They were in theater and they had a lot of friends in the arts, and basically they were surrounded by people who made things, and one of these things were posters. People hand-painted posters. That doesn't exist today. I mean, you can imagine the amount of movies that were being made hasn't changed. It's not that it's increased insanely for it to only be digital today, but painters existed. They worked day in and day out, and they painted and painted. And you still remember the images of old, old Egyptian movies where you had these beautiful actors hand painted. They were works of art. Doesn't exist today. I mean, if you I went and tried to find poster painters. They don't exist. Why should they exist when it costs 10,000 times less to produce 10,000 times more? Digitally. I was studying at LAU during this period. I was studying political science, which didn't last very long. So I started to ditch classes and look for artisans. And I was told that the only artisans that I would find now lived in Bush Hamoud. For those of you who don't know Beirut, Bush Hamoud is the Armenian district of Beirut. And it's a very lively area. It's a great place to be, and it's basically entering into Armenia. I mean, like this sign says, welcome to Bush Hamoud, and you have it in English and in Arabic, but I think that's the only sign that doesn't have Armenian in its text. And these people are amazing. They were welcoming. I arrived, and I came across one of many factories, jewelry factories that exists. And for those of you who know me, know the story and have heard it a million times, but it's significant because it changed my entire career. Basically, I worked under 5 Armenian jewelers who worked for themselves in a factory that they collectively rented. They collectively rented this factory, and they would produce jewelry day in and out. I mean, they would produce what they believed the market wanted. And it was very commercial jewelry. And they would work and work and work and work on these pieces. And in the morning, dealers would come to the door. And there was just a glass sliding door. The door would open. A dealer would walk in. And these pieces of jewelry were sold for nothing. And they weren't worth nothing in the sense that I was sent on errands to go and buy stones. And stones are a lot cheaper. I mean, commercial stones are a lot cheaper than people think they are. And I mean, these stones were inexpensive diamonds that exist by the hundreds, and were sold off for nothing, and then resold for God knows how much. And I was working under one particular jeweler called Hagab, who was my age and who had been making jewelry since he was 8 or 9, and loved making jewelry. I mean, this guy, he woke up, he would dream about it. He was more passionate than anyone I know about anything to today. Till today, he still exists, he still makes jewelry. And basically, and he's fed up of the story, but basically he produced a pair of cascading diamond earrings. They were mediocre diamonds, and he said that they would fall like water. And he would dream and dream and dream and dream about these earrings. And he produced them. It took a week and a half to produce. That's a long time for a pair of earrings. And they did fall like water. I mean, they weren't to my taste, but they were quite beautiful. And he said, you'll see, tomorrow when the dealer walks in and the door opens, it's the first thing he's going to take. Next day, dealer walks in, first thing. He looks at it and he says, those pair. I'm going to sell those today. So they bargained, as they usually do, and it came down to not much over the cost of the pair of earrings. I mean, Hagab made money on these earrings, but he wasn't paid for the passion and the time and the sleepless nights and dreaming. I mean, none of that was incorporated in the bill. It was just the cost of the product plus a little bit of markup for them to continue. And the earrings were sold. In the meantime, I was a little bit downhearted. I felt like we had kind of abandoned these jewelers. We had abandoned the artisans. Where were they? Where was anybody? So I thought the answer was in the West. I was going to go to London. I was going to go to Central St. Martin's. I was going to go to the London College of Fashion, and I was going to learn what it was to really run a successful luxury brand. And I was going to come back, and I was going to employ Hagab, and I was going to start this insanely fantastic Middle Eastern luxury brand. And it's Hagab, and it's these 5 jewelers who got me into that school, because they gave me the time of day. I mean, I was useless to them. They didn't take a penny for the day, the time I spent, and I wasted a lot of their time. And I got into school because of them, and because of the portfolio they allowed me to produce. And right before I went to school, I was going to say goodbye to Hagab, and he called me ecstatic. He couldn't speak. He was so happy. And he told me, on your way into the bush, there's a big billboard that we normally pass by. He said, look up. When you're entering, look at the bush, look at the sign. So I did. And I passed by the sign, and I don't have a picture of that sign because I was in a service and we were going pretty fast. But my stomach, went into knots. I looked at it, and it was Hagab's pair of cascading diamond earrings. And they were there beautifully surrounded by all the lights, and they looked exquisite on this huge billboard, on a model, in an incredible setting. But they had another jeweler's name on it. And of course, this I didn't know was the norm. I walked into Hagab. Hagab is jumping up and down. I'm horrified, asking him, how can that happen? You made these diamond earrings. Why does it say that these other jewelers made your diamond earrings? So he looked at me confused. He said, what, do you think they make all their jewelry? I said, of course. When I go and I buy jewelry from these big Lebanese jewelry houses, I'm expecting to get something that a designer had sat down, designed, sourced the stones. And what I didn't say was, I was horrified at the actual cost. I knew how much these products cost, about how much this pair of earrings cost. This was ridiculous. I knew how much these guys would be selling it for. He told me, عادي, normal. It's just another day. Get over it. It's a reality. So I got over it. And I went to London. I didn't get over it, but I went to London. And I began my quest at the London College of Fashion to find out what it meant to have, what it would entail to own a luxury brand. And I arrived, spirits high, really excited, and I was horrified. I mean, I walked in, and the first thing one of our professors said when he walked into the room was, I'm not going to bother to remember any of your names, because in 3 years, a quarter of you will still be here, if not less. Everyone was like, that gave them the drive, like, yeah, it's going to be me, it's going to be me. I was like, I am getting out of here. I hate these people. Everyone looks like a shark. I can't handle this kind of competition. But I stayed, and I graduated, thankfully, but it wasn't fun. And in the beginning, they started to teach us classes, what it meant to have a brand, what it meant to start up a company, what it meant as a young designer, where you had to work before, you had to intern and work for free, which was completely normal. I had just done that in Beirut, but basically that you had to be treated like a dog, you had to be walked over, and then maybe one day you might become the head designer of somebody else's luxury brand. I mean, it wasn't teaching anything about craft. I mean, there wasn't an element of going back and, really learning about what it was to be a designer. I mean, to know every aspect of the trade that you're getting into, or that you're creating and that you're designing. I mean, none of that was involved. We were actually taught a class called Tricks of the Trade. And this specific class stayed in my mind forever, where they basically told us, listen, these luxury houses that exist today have spent years and years and years gaining the trust of their consumer. So when they buy a product, they still expect it to be produced in the same way that it initially was. This can't be the case because now these luxury brands have been bought by LVMH or whomever and now produce, instead of 200 pieces of a bag, 20,000 to be able to cater to China, Japan, American markets, Middle Eastern. So luxury being defined by rarity no longer exists. And these poor luxury houses, what are they going to do? They have to cater to these demands. So they're going to produce, for instance, a pair of shoes. The sole of the pair of shoes will be produced in Italy. The body of the shoe will be produced in China. So that when you, as a consumer, go into a store and sit down on the very beautifully upholstered couch and get fantastic service and wear your shoe and turn around to make sure that it's the right size, it still says made in Italy. That is a complete, that's catering to your idea of what this luxury house still means. Unfortunately, most of the time, that's no longer the case. Only because because of our incessant need to consume and the overproduction of absolutely everything, it's impossible to produce that many products with a small, factory of 500 craftsmen. It's not going to happen. You need a big factory. You need machines working day in and out. You need people who are going to work, 17 hours a day without a problem and for a very cheap rate if you're going to keep up the rate of paying for advertising and paying for rent and paying for all the high costs that you're going to have as a big brand. So at school, they encourage you to basically find out as much as you can from designers that existed already. And one day we were all brought to the auditorium and we were told that someone very, 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 very special was going to come. So all of us fluttering like chickens were, imagining who it was going to be. And we sat in this auditorium and very dramatically, which is completely in his style, a screen came. And we were live streaming with Marc Jacobs. So Marc Jacobs, for those of you who don't know, is the creative director of Louis Vuitton, which is one of the brands synonymous for its handcrafted luggage, and at one point only luggage, and leather goods. And today it's a multi-luxury brand that covers almost all kinds of products, including travel guides, furniture, clothing, anything, you name it, Louis Vuitton's covered it. And Marc Jacobs was there, and everyone, God had entered the room. Everyone went quiet. They couldn't believe it. A girl started crying. They didn't understand if he was there and he was being projected on the screen. For those of you who've seen The Wizard of Oz, it was like Oz had started to speak. And I must admit, at the time, I had just moved to London and I didn't really know who Marc Jacobs was. So I was a bit like, oh wow, okay, yeah, I'm as excited as everybody else. What the hell's going on and what does he have to say? And he just looked at us and said, it's going to be tough, guys. He's like, listen, it's going to be really tough. You have to know that now if you have friends, you're not going to have friends. If you want to work, if you think you're working hard, nothing. He's like, you're going to have to do a lot of drugs to stay up for a lot of nights to work day in and day out to produce 4 collections a year, 2 which are probably never seen. If you meet friends, it's for work. If you do anything that has to do with normality, it has to do with work. It's basically hell, but sometimes it's satisfying. And it's satisfying to watch a runway. He said, it's satisfying to watch models walk down a runway wearing your clothes. So everyone was, you could see the imaginations of everyone around us kind of envisioning themselves on this runway, walking in after taking, a bow with applause and their collections being displayed. And he said, but fear not, because that will last only a few moments before you're rushed off to design the next collection, and 3/4 of that collection will not be produced because it won't be commercial enough. I was horrified. I wanted out fast. So when the school was suggesting that we get internships at the likes of Burberry, Louis Vuitton, Stella McCartney, and everyone was fighting everyone for these internships, I decided to go to India. I had been to India in 2006, and I had interned with, very shortly, with a jeweler whose name is Munu Kasliwal, who is one of the most incredible jewelers. I'll get to him. But basically, I moved to India, and at the moment I landed, something felt different. I mean, I landed at 4 o'clock in the morning. I got off the plane. It was hot. It was in the middle of nowhere. There was no airport in Jaipur still. The Jaipur airport was a bungalow that was a bit farther from the plane. And I saw everyone from the plane really excited. Air Arabia, they're all like running, coming back from their jobs in India and running towards the bungalow. And I was like, I could run that way, I could run that way, I could run that way. I'm gonna go with these guys. So I went with them, and I entered the bungalow, and everyone was kind of looking, because tourists don't usually go through Jaipur. And they were so excited. They were so excited I was there. They were so excited that these guys were coming back from wherever they were working. And people were just really, really, really happy. And you know, when you're in an airport, you're on automatic mode. You're like, okay, get out of my way. I have to go. I have to get to the airport. I have to get to the passport control. I have to pass by. But people were conversing. They were chilled out. They were relaxed. Everyone was kind of really relaxed. So I was like, okay. So I told 5 or 6 people what I was doing in India, which I didn't really know at the time. And it was 4:35 before I left the bungalow, and the sun started to rise. And I started to see India for what India is. And India is one of the most beautiful, chaotic messes that ever existed in the world. It's incredible. I mean, I don't even know, I could show you a million pictures. Not one will ever capture the real beauty of what India is. And I mean, the elephants, the colors, the smells, everything, it was almost too much to handle, almost too beautiful. But I knew at that moment I wasn't going to go anywhere. I was there to stay. So basically, what I want to say is that, beginning of what I want to say is that, the middle, not to worry, but of what I want to say is that if luxury is determined by the unnecessary, by adorning, by decorating the unnecessary, then the poor of India are by far the richest people in the world, because the picture that you see now is the picture of the woman who comes to my house every morning and picks up the garbage. She sings while she works. She wears a silk sari. The base is cotton, which changes every day. It never matches, but it always makes sense. And she has the most style of almost anyone I know. She wears bangles up to her elbows, up to her shoulders if there's a marriage that day. And when she doesn't pick up garbage, during the day she works on construction sites. And she picks up kilos and kilos and kilos of cement on her head, and she does that in a sari, dressed as you can see her now. She's quite incredible. And I remember a friend had come and said, "Oh my God, haram, you know, that's really tough." And I was like, "Why? Why haram?" She's proud of what she does. She gets up early every morning to make sure she looks amazing, and she does. She adorns everything around her, and that's great, good for her. I mean, she doesn't feel sorry for herself. Why should you, right? This is a guard of one of the palaces that is completely abandoned, and basically he completely decorated his surroundings. He painted Krishna on the top of his door. He doesn't have the means, but he made sure he found the means so that every day he could come home and his house was beautiful. And I mean, this is amongst a million stories. I can tell you, I've gone to slums where I've arrived, and like a slum where they're literally working in kilos and kilos of garbage, and these guys are like sweeping right in front of their house and putting pots and plants and making stuff out of garbage. I mean, they're incredible. And the trucks, there are books and books and books published in the West about the trucks of India, and they're all incredibly adorned. They say the most bizarre things on them and the most beautiful things, poetry, and they're painted and they're covered in, this is nothing. This is a guy who really didn't have the time. I mean, they go completely, I've seen fluorescent pink trucks, I've seen trucks with a woman's silhouette where the lights are her breasts, and they turn on as soon as he turns on I mean, they go nuts. And this is completely out of their own budget. It's not like they were like, okay, the owner of the truck or the guy who's hiring me, give me some cash. No, no. They do this out of their own budget. I mean, they adorn themselves. That to me is the utmost luxury. Now, I arrived in India and decided to work for the year where you have to work as part of my degree at the Gem Palace for Munu Kasliwal. And it was an introduction to a completely different world. The jewelry world in India is almost still the same, in the sense that, for instance, the jewelry world in Lebanon, as I described it, where these guys are working in factories, they're mass producing quickly, so they can send their kids to school and cover their costs, etc. India, the jewelers are still considered treasures. I mean, these guys are I mean, of course, there are slums and there are sweatshops everywhere, but from what I've seen and the information that I've accumulated, it's incredible, and the jewelers love what they do. And the entire rhythm, for instance, I met Munu. Munu is my mentor, and I worked for him for 3 years, and I've learned everything that I know today from Munu. And basically, he told me that the first day when I went to work with him, there was a dealer who was walking in, and basically the beauty of Munu is that most jewelers make jewelry. They go and they buy the stones in the market. So there's a whole market for stones. And then they'll buy the stones and they'll produce jewelry out of it, or they'll design jewelry. They'll go and they'll buy the stones. Munu buys it rough. Basically, that's Munu at the bottom right. But these are Golconda diamonds. They're old mine diamonds that Munu came across and set beautifully. But what I want to show you is this was basically rough. And Munu told me the first day I walked in, he was really excited because he had got a huge emerald qalam. And he told me, come, do you like stones? Who doesn't like stones? So I didn't know what to say. I just looked at him and he's like, every time you buy rough, and rough is basically an uncut stone. So he told me, every time you buy a rough Noor, you're playing Russian roulette. He told me, Russian roulette, like the game where the gun and it goes around and you potentially kill yourself. He's like, yeah, exactly. He said, because I bought this qalam for an obscene amount of money, and it could be a jackpot, or it could get me in a lot of trouble because I'd have to owe the dealer a lot of money, and probably it would take a really long time to make that up. Basically, what happens is that he buys this stone because he believes that he knows, I mean, no one really knows, but that he can see whether it's good or not. And you never really know, because if that stone can make one one cut stone that's perfect and clear and perfect in every way, it's almost priceless. I mean, he could sell it for a mint. But you could cut it up and cut it up and cut it up and cut it up, and it could have nothing that was big enough and clear enough. So in fact, it's worth nothing, and you're going to have to make something small with very, very small stones, and it's going to take you a long time to pay back that dealer. And that's exactly what happened. He took me to have the stone cut, and he told me, watch. We're going to find it. We're going to find this one. I can feel it. It's from Madagascar. I can feel it. I can feel it. We have a big stone in there. We started to cut and shave and shave and shave. And there were inclusions. Remove this inclusion. Remove that inclusion. This is not right. This is not right. Nothing. Munu looked at me. He said, Russian roulette. I just got shot in the head. So that's one of the rhythms of a jeweler. Another was the dynamic that a jeweler has with a dealer. Like a dealer walks in with rough. So as you can see, a big piece before it's cut. And he walks in and he sits down and they have a normal conversation. How are you? How is your children? How's everything going? Fine, fine, fine. The stone comes on the table. I mean, the first time I saw a stone come on the table, I almost fainted. And he looked at him and they continued the conversation. And then randomly in the conversation, they'll say, 10,000. Then the dealer will look at him, continue the conversation, and the dealer will say, no, wait, 20,000. No, and then this goes back and forth. And it's a really abstract conversation. Basically, they're bargaining without being rude, without having to say, like, no way, you're ripping me off. It's very polite, and it's a dance. And they never agree initially. This took me a long time, and I thought it was a royal waste of time. I was like, I don't understand, just agree. You know you're going to buy it. Come up with a price. The guy has to get up, he has to take the stone, he has the rough, he has to leave, and he has to leave an object behind. So he'll leave his cane, or he'll leave his scarf, or he'll leave something. And the next day, the guy will come back, and say, oh, Munuji, I forgot my scarf, I forgot my cane. And he'll sit down and Munuji will tell him, did you think about the price? And then they'll do the little dance again and they'll agree on something. But Munu told me, you never buy rough on the same day. I told him, but sometimes, it's the same price. You're paying the same price, you agree. I mean, the guy, he didn't move. You're paying the same price. He told me, it's a method. It's been working for centuries. It's going to continue working for centuries. It works. And I told him, but yeah, time is money. And he told me, no, Noor, time is not money. He's like, time is the ultimate luxury, and you decide if you have time. You decide if you make time. These are pictures of what happens when, for instance, you can see the emerald shavings. Like, it wasn't of that rough, but that's what happens. They'll break down a stone to see how small they can get it before it's perfect. They shave their own stones. They facet everything by hand. Everything's done. I mean, Munu believed that if you were going to be a real designer, you were going to do your product from the beginning till the end. You find the rough, you cut the stone, you make the design, you set the stone. Everything had to be done under your eye, and that's what it meant to have a luxury brand. His jewelers still use traditional techniques. I mean, usually now, any jeweler knows that you use a gun that fires gun. These guys control the fire through a pipe through their mouths. And I mean, I tried for like 3 seconds. I almost killed myself. But I mean, it's quite insane. It's quite intense. And these guys do it naturally. I mean, they do it naturally. They love it. And when Munu walks in and he watches them work, they know that he's appreciating every minute of it. And these guys know their worth, which is something that I think is very, very important. Here are examples of Munu's jewelry. I just thought I'd show it to you because I think they're very beautiful. This is a technique, a traditional technique. I could go on talking about hours about his work, but I won't. Munu was a dreamer, basically. Munu was the kind of man where he'd wake up one morning and have an idea, and it would be the most insane idea, and the next day you would be doing it. And this was one of his insane ideas. We were traveling, and we were passing by Amber Fort, which is one of the most beautiful forts in India. And he told me, I want to shop in Amber Fort. I told him, okay, great. Who has a shop in a fort? And he told me, no, I'm going to have a fashion store. He had started a fashion store called Hot Pink. And he told me, I want Hot Pink to be in Amber Fort. It's a great idea. I think it's going to be really beautiful. I was like, okay. In 2 weeks, we had a space in Amber Fort. It was all over the newspapers. People were fighting and people were arguing. And how could he open a store in a fort? But he did it. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. And I was in charge of that project. And basically, I was in charge of the interiors, of taking care of getting everything done for the store, which he made look really easy and which I found out was very difficult. This is one of the geometric gardens by the fort. That's very beautiful. And this is what they call the winter garden. It's an entire area that's covered in carved, in shaped mirror. And basically it's where the Maharaja would sit to watch his courtesans dance. And they would dance in the middle of the night, so pitch black, under the moonlight, and they would have candles in their hands. So as they would dance, these images would appear. So now, in broad daylight, you see exactly what it looks like. But when these women would dance in circles with these candles, you would see vases, you would see floral motifs, and it was demonstrated to me one evening, and it's the most beautiful thing in the world. So Hot Pink was opened in Amber Fort, and this was the beginning of my career, because basically every aspect had to be covered, and Munu was the kind of person who didn't trust anyone to do anything except himself, and so as I was his assistant, that was my job. And I would tell him, Munu, we really need a carpet. And he's like, yeah, we'll make one. I was like, okay. So Munu, we really need a curtain. Yeah, have one made. I was like, okay, we need lamps. We need carved lamps. He's like, yeah, it's okay. Go and get them done. I initially wanted to kill him because it was so much work, but then I started to understand when everything came together. He used to always tell me, when you envision something, the only way it's going to come out exactly as you want it to is if you do it yourself. And Hot Pink is exactly what Munu envisioned, and I thank God that he did it, because I wouldn't have been able to meet, and I wouldn't have been introduced to an entire world of artisans in Jaipur if it wasn't for it. But one of the artisans that I worked with I was the most impressed by was the jali artisan, the jaliwala. And basically, if you see the motif behind the picture of hot pink, those are called jalis, and they're separations that are made to aerate a room, and they're carved out of marble. And they're hand carved. They're hand carved. They're not done with a mold. They're hand carved out of slates of marble, and they're exquisite. And we had them done, and basically I had done a month's worth of work. And Munu walked in, who had just come back from New York, and he walked in, and he was like, "It's kind of stuffy." And I told him, "Yeah, it's August in Jaipur. I mean, what were you expecting?" He's like, No. There's not enough wind." I'm like, "There's no wind. There's no wind. Don't expect wind." And I knew what was coming. And he's like, "I think that the jaliwala should open the slits of this geometric pattern in the marble by a millimeter." I was like, "You want him to redo everything by a millimeter?" He's like, yeah. I want it done. I want it done now." I was like, "You want it done now? What are you, insane? The guy installed it. No way. I'm not going to tell him. You tell him. I have no time. I have to go to London. I'll be back. Make sure it's done." I was mortified. I was convinced that Munu was going to die from this guy's evil eye on the way to the airport or wherever he was going, or I was going to when I had to tell him. So I basically sat with the guy. I was really apologetic. I was looking at him. "I'm really sorry to have to tell you this." And the guy was looking at me like, "Bring it on. I know. I've worked with Munu. I know what it's about." I told him. He looked at me. At the time, I spoke zero Hindi, and he said something which I'm sure was really, really rude. But he did it. He did it, and he worked day in and day out. And it's because, I mean, that was the first example of what I realized what it was to be a patron. When someone's a patron and someone's a really, really, really good patron, they're going to ask something from someone they work with that's really a pain, and something that the artisan they're working with doesn't want to do. But the artisan trusts their patron just as much as the patron trusts their artisan. And this almost doesn't exist today. I mean, in Beirut, I had to get something really simple and basic done. And I asked the guy to make it. It was with a carpenter, and it was a box. And he basically stopped midway. And he stopped midway. I asked him why he stopped, and he told me, "It's because you don't know what you're doing. And you don't know what you're doing, and I want to do another job." And it he's not a grumpy man, he's not a bad man, but it was just, he had been fed up of people. He didn't trust the person who was asking him to do something. These guys trust Munu. They trust their patron. It's something that's very, very, very important. And Munu came back, and I was ready to kill him. And the guy, he walked in, and the artisan who had been like giving me snide remarks, not making eye contact, super pissed off, was like super happy to see Munu. Sees Munu, and look at my work, it's done, it's finished. And Munu looks at him and he says, "You see?" And we were standing in the middle of hot pink, and I kid you not, there was a breeze. I don't know where Munu found the breeze, but there was a breeze. And basically, the artisan then explains to the guy who I'm working with, who's translating. He's like, "Of course, it makes sense. He made a hole in the geometry. It makes sense now. You know, can't you feel it? He created a breeze." So I was like, okay. Basically, he knows what he's doing. This is Jali. So with Munu, I went to villages. I sourced. I mean, I started making carpets. I started making all kinds of material, working with all kinds of materials. And before I knew it, I started to rent a space with 2 other girls in Jaipur. And I live there now, and we all at one point worked with Munu, or in Munu's office, for another jeweler named Marialende Tayak. And we basically wanted to become them. So we wanted to live in a world that we had imagined, and we wanted to create everything, and we wanted to continue working with these artisans that we had met, and then that started to happen. So we started to make our own lights, we started to make our own beds, we started to make our own tables, our own carpets. We started to paint the kitchen fans, ceiling fans, and my brand was born. Basically, we worked with so many things that I knew that it wasn't going to end, and that I had to go off on my own. And Munu told me to go ahead, and he was really happy. And I was juggling London, going back and forth from London, but it was great because I made my whole thesis at school about my fashion brand. And it was basically covering the fact that working with an artisan should be the ultimate luxury. It's no longer the norm. It once was, and it's no longer the norm. So working with them is really a luxury, and it's something that we should appreciate. Every city we live in has artisans. In Beirut, they still exist. In Kuwait, they still exist. They exist everywhere, and we should really thrive on that, because these guys are I mean, I see so many people bargaining with a very cheap object, with someone who's just made it by hand, not considering the fact that they've made it by hand. And this same person will go to a luxury store and not consider for a second to bargain for a product that I'm sure cost more or less the same to produce. So really, I mean, I wanted to kind of change that and change it in myself and start to work more with these people, and that's exactly what I did. I developed Noon, and I did what Munu told me. Munu said if you wanted to produce anything that was good, you had to cover it from the beginning to the end. So I started to produce my own textiles. And I work with a group of artisans. It took a long time to find a group of artisans that agreed to work with me, and I finally did, and I'm very happy with them. And so I cover the whole process of dyeing the fabric, hanging the fabric to dry, and this is cotton, meters and meters and meters of cotton that have just come out of a vat, have gone from white to a slightly off-white, and it takes a long time for them to dry, and it's one of the most beautiful things you'll ever see. And if you go to the countryside in Jaipur, it's full of these structures. And also I focus on printing, and in printing you use pigments, and these are the pigments that you use, and you kind of weigh them. Well, they weigh them, and they charge you according to how many weights they use. I mean, like, they literally use this system of weighing pigment. You can see he's weighing out the pigment, which is on the other end. He then handwrites it in a ledger, and you get a handwritten bill at the end, which is basically how much pigment you used. And there's something really, really beautiful and human about that. I'm not going and you know, buying meters by the roll, fabric by the roll that a lot of people are going to use. I'm working with a guy who's done this for years, who knows. I mean, you tell him I want this color, which is a color like, you know, teal or whatever, and he'll produce it out of memory of what the mixture out of memory and experience of what these pigments make. Here are them mixing the colors. I give him the design, and we have to discuss how to, if we want it to be a two-color design, how it should be carved, how the block should be made, and these artisans then make the blocks. The pigments are produced, are then mixed onto different cottons, and we have to sample the colors initially to see if they're the right samples, the right colors, sorry. This is one of the blocks that I use a lot. And this is sampling, so we'll use different blocks that I've produced, or the designs of which I've produced and they've worked on, and we use different colors that we've decided, that we've put together for a collection. And what's a lot of fun is that it develops in a completely natural way, because it develops according to the artisan that you're working with. So if he doesn't like the color pink, which is very rare in India, or he doesn't like the color blue, for instance, he'll tell you to like try something out. You're a bit, you know, reluctant initially, and then he'll push you, and things develop on a human scale, you know. I mean, you are working with a team. It's great. And then there's the chai break, which happens almost every 20 minutes and is crucial. There's a lot of sugar and a little bit of tea. Then you start to print absolutely everything. This is where friends of mine tights, and she really wanted gold tights, so we brought them in. Catastrophic mistake, but this is a lot of fun. And the artisans were like, yeah, okay, I have something else to do, but I'll do this because I'm curious to see if it's going to work. And what's really beautiful is that you get fabrics and fabrics underneath of accumulated prints, because you print and you print and you print, and you're printing on a table. And the canvas that's under this table accumulates all the prints that have been used. So for instance, I made a skirt for reuse, and it was using these fabrics, and it was, in my opinion, worked out very well. Here are a few samples of the prints that I've produced, one of which I'm wearing now. I tried to go digital because it seemed to be a trend, and I thought that it would help market my brand. And funnily enough, it succeeded, but it didn't work out as well. And I think it's because it didn't have the texture. It's still quite flat. It's an interesting medium, but I'm trying now to figure out whether I can use this and mix it with block printing. And these are a few examples of the work that I've done. You can't see the print here because I usually do this with just tone-on-tone printing, but it's there. That's the digital printing. And what's the best part is that once you do this and you go and you find your friends and they model for you and you do a photo shoot and you have an exhibition and everything and you come back, that you're surrounded by these artisans who are super excited, and they ask you like, is she famous? It's like, no, sorry, I'm really sorry. Is she famous? No, almost famous. She's almost there, but she's not famous yet. And they feel a part of it. Now, I started with a friend called Noor Sabah. We started a pop-up series in Beirut where we introduced the city of Beirut to different cities around the world. And we started with Jaipur. We did Beirut Loves Jaipur. And I basically, with Noor, we took over a space that was completely abandoned and completely empty, and which was wall-to-wall with Hermes in downtown Beirut, which is a fantastic area. And this space had nothing, no electricity, no floors. It was really ready to be installed by a big luxury brand. And we took over the space and made it our own little pop-up. And for Beirut Loves Jaipur, we brought designers from India. We produced our own things as well, and Noon was part of it. And it was a huge success. A lot of people came. We practically sold out. It was great because we didn't have to pay rent. I mean, the rent was given by Noor's father. It was all perfect. But what I realized was that everyone walk in and tell me, but it's made in India. Why is it expensive? But it's made in India. Why should I buy it here when I know that I can go and maybe go find it somewhere really, really cheap in the souk? What's really important to realize is that basically you should question that when you go into a store that's charging you $10,000 for a bag, because I can guarantee you, and I know this from experience and from being at the London College of Fashion, that bag costs no more than $100 to $200 produced, if it was really produced with artisans, which half of them are not. And you should question why you're paying for the advertisement and for the rent and for the like billion PR hosts that are basically running the show for that brand. That's what you're paying for. You're not paying for the product, and most of the time you're paying for basically new technology to make new things faster. So basically that's what it is. That's what I'm trying to say, and it's very important to consider what luxury really is, and to look at what we have around us. I'm not trying to teach a lesson, and I know a lot of people still do, but it's very, very important. Thanks. I think I'm supposed to do questions and answers if I didn't go over.
Hi. I have a question. You're studying fashion design, but you took an internship in jewelry design.
I studied fashion. I studied, in fact, I studied at the London College of Fashion, but I studied product design. And when you study product design, we covered women's wear, we covered cordwainers, which is leather accessories, and we covered jewelry.
How did jewelry design help you create those pieces?
It helped me because it introduced me to a world where basically, I mean, when you think of jewelry, it's construction, and it's construction in every sense of the word. It's a bit like architecture. And it introduced me to the world of Manu, where basically he covered everything. That was really, that helped me get where I am, because I realized the importance of doing every single part of jewelry making, like sourcing the rough, getting the stone cut according to your design, designing, etc. So that's how it helped.
Salam. You asked a question. People ask you why your brand is expensive, but you answered another question. Why is other brand is expensive? Can I know why is yours? I don't know the actual price of your.
No, it's a very good question. I didn't answer another question. I was saying before you question, it wasn't my brand. I was describing products from India, because there were products that we had brought in the store from India. And basically, what I was saying was these people were saying that, why is it expensive? It's from India. And there were objects that were luxury products that were made by young designers who had gone to design school and who were living in India and producing in India. Why is it that if something's produced in India, it's automatically considered cheap? I said, when you go somewhere else, in Europe, for instance, you never second guess anything. You automatically trust what the brand is selling you, because it's a brand that was established in the West and that's backed by years of establishment, when half of the places in India are backed with years of experience. I mean, why question one and not the other?
True, but I think their point of view is India, the worker is cheaper, so...
But if you remember, I told you that one of the classes I took was called Tricks of the Trade. So when you presume that the worker in India is working for cheaper, it's true. He is definitely working for cheaper. But where you're going to buy your shoe, the sole is made in Italy. The body of the shoe is made somewhere else. And it's mass-produced, which means that if anything is mass-produced, it's a million times cheaper than what it's meant to be. So... okay, the guy who's working to make whatever in India might be working for cheaper. I mean, you have all kinds of craftsmen. But whoever's producing the product that you're buying in a luxury store in the West could very well be working for a very, very less than minimum wage as well.
Thank you very much.